Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Venomverse miniseries as we take a look at Venomverse number 2. Now, last time on Venomverse! While duking it out with the supervillain Jack-O-Lantern, Eddie Brock, aka Venom, was pulled into a parallel universe alongside an army of alternate Venoms and Venomized superheroes from parallel universes. The person that wound up calling them was a Venomized version of Doctor Strange, who gathered this team of Venoms together to duke it out with a race of beings called the Poisons. These scraggly little creatures that, when they come into contact with someone with a symbiote, they essentially consume them, as they call it, and essentially assimilate them into their hive mind, transforming transforming the hero into one of them, retaining all their powers and abilities, but now essentially becoming a part of their hive mind, so to speak. While Venom, of course, is a little hesitant to join this army, unfortunately, as he's introduced to it, well, their home base ends up getting attacked by a poison version of the Hulk. And sadly, in the confrontation, one of the Venoms, specifically Agent Venom, is killed, and the Venomized Captain America ends up getting captured. Thankfully, the rest of the Venoms managed to scatter, with our Venom managing to run away with an alternate version of Spider-Man. Unfortunately, in their escape, they wound up running into a poison version of Dr. Octopus. While the pair fought valiantly and Venom was able to finish it off, sadly, Spider-Man wound up falling victim to the poison's psychic tricks and wound up being consumed, transforming into another poison and turning his attentions on Venom, which is where issue 2 begins, as Venom and the now transformed Spider-Man are duking it out. And unfortunately, it's not looking good for Venom, as the things they were talking about last issue were not a lie. But now that the poison has consumed Spidey's symbiote, he's now a lot stronger and very much outclasses Venom in every regard. And sadly, Venom's own tricks on dealing with the webhead won't be as effective against this poison variant. Now, hold on a sec. Sorry, I'm just gonna adjust this a little bit. There we go. Anyway, yeah, basically Anyway, my point is this: Poison Spider-Man is just whooping Venom's ass and just pretty much mocking him the entire time. And while this does end up really pissing Venom off, sadly can't really exert that anger on Spidey, because thanks to his new armored shell, he can't break through, and thanks to Spider-Man's improved powers, like I said, he's just beaten to a stain on the ground until finally, Spider-Man just holds him in place for a bunch of more little poisons to come and try and assimilate them. Thankfully, before they even get the chance, Venom is saved by members of the Venom army, specifically Spinneret, the Venomized Wolverine, and the Venomized Deadpool, who all come in and start giving Venom support and allowing him time to heal. However, in the midst of the battle, again, Spidey is still whooping their asses. He's still very much more powerful than any of them, even with their own improved powers, and even starts calling them all subpar hosts that even Spider-Man knew he wasn't worthy of being a symbiote, which just sounds more like Spider-Man beating himself up, but whatever. But my point is this: he's pretty much just saying that they're all nothing, and that the poisons are the perfect hosts. They can give the symbiotes, and they can make their symbiotes so much stronger, and blah blah blah. However, in the midst of the battle, as Spinneret tries to do a sneak attack on Spidey, he manages to grab her and holds her by her neck. But as he's holding her, she just tells him, "Do it." She just tells him to do it, Tiger. Get it over with. And well, Poison Spidey actually hesitates for a brief second. He recognizes her, and even says, "MJ, But ultimately, this opening does enough to allow Venom to come back into the fight and start duking it out. But that moment of hesitation did not go unnoticed, because it turns out Deadpool saw it, and well, he starts thinking. Because later on you do see him just kind of pondering in the background, but ultimately it's kind of pointless. Thankfully, in the midst of the battle, the Venomized heroes were able to take out all the little poisons, as Deadpool, even Venomized, is armed with tons of guns to boot, so he can take them out without having to touch them. And so Spidey, despite still having the advantage and now having gotten over that brief moment of hesitation with Spinneret, decides, you know what, screw you guys, this isn't worth it, and just swings away. As such, the Venoms end up going back to the rest of the Venom army, which are also on the bridge and have gathered as many resources as they can, but they know they have to keep going. The last base has been compromised, so there has to be somewhere else they can hide to stay away from the poisons. And thankfully, Wolverine says that he has a way, as he and Cap had a backup plan where they both came up with a series of safe houses without telling the other. So that way, if one of them got compromised, then the other could find places that the other would be able to take the Venom army someplace where they'd be safe. Which, speaking of, Well, Venom starts wanting to ask questions to Doctor Strange because, well, before Spider-Man turned, he was trying to tell Eddie about how the whole process was with the poisons and how they consumed hosts. And so ultimately the Venoms decide that they need to give the main Venom the lowdown on what's going on. And well, put simply, when they say that the poisons consume a host, that's not a turn of phrase. That's not another word for that means assimilation. It, in a way, it kind of does, but it also is kind of literal. You see, when a poison, through a trick of evolution that they've surmised, when a poison comes into contact with a symbiote, well, essentially, it's like they were made for each other, and which I suspect is because of how the poisons operate. In their base form, they are very much plain, simple, weak, and fragile. You basically could just kick them. You can pretty much just kick them in, or you can pretty much just kick them, or take a small rock and smash them, as we saw with Venom in the last issue, and they would just go down for the count. So basically, these things are very much weak, which would actually explain the psychic defense that they mount whenever they encounter the Venoms. Odds are that's something that they can do normally, and it keeps people from going after them. And since that as we've seen, even if you know about the psychic trick, you're still susceptible to it, as we saw with Spider-Man. Well, put simply, at their core, it's just they're weak creatures that essentially they're easily taken down. However, through that weakness, there's adaptability. As we see that with how frisky they are, with how agile they are. Again, going back to the psychic defense thing. But then you have a symbiote. And the symbiote's natural inclination is that they have the ability to bond with and improve whatever it is that they bond with. No, they have the ability to bond with and improve whatever organism they choose to stay with. And we see that with various Venomized heroes. It's not only do we see that they all have like variations on Spider-Man's powers because they're all bonded with different versions of the same symbiote, but their own abilities are all naturally improved, stronger. So then combine that with a poison. And because of how the poisons operate and because of the hive mind, essentially when the symbiote joins with them, it like literally joins with them. They become a part of one another. And the added benefit actually ends up going back on the symbiote and makes them stronger. But but again, because of the whole hive mind aspect, the symbiote's will is stripped away, as they said. But then that's where the consuming comes in, because such a bonding process can't just be done with nothing. There has to be fuel for the tank, as we shall say. Something has to be sacrificed in order for the simulation to work, which is why the Venom army has been saying the poisons consume the hosts, because they quite literally do. In order to fully bond with the symbiote and absorb it into their metabolism, they break down the original host and transform them into nutrients to fuel the process. To put it nicely, the poisons take control of the symbiote and kill the original host in the process. And of course, because of how the poison essentially overtakes the symbiote and the host, essentially everything that was the host gets absorbed and essentially becomes a part of the fold. And as we see, it's clear that when the poisons bond with the symbiotes, they also inherit those symbiotes' natural traits, which in this case, since they're bonded with so many unique and different heroes, that means that they also they essentially take on the forms of those heroes. They essentially overtake the heroes and just essentially erase everything that they were as they fade away into the hive mind. Again, in other words, like I said, put it simply, when the poisons come into contact with someone with a symbiote, they die, and the poisons essentially just hijack everything that they once were. And yes, it is very much fucked up, which is part of the reason why the Venoms are so concerned with Cap, because, well, if he's been captured, he's next on the chopping block. And sure enough, that is exactly what happens. As during the issue, we do end up cutting back with Cap, and we see that sure enough, he is being held in a poison base. He hasn't been turned yet, but he has been severely weakened. As we see that his shield is no longer being influenced by the symbiote, and there's a very clear dent in it. And every time Cap tries to break through his shackles, he's hit with sonic emitters, which immediately weaken him to the point where he can't do anything. So he's pretty much dead in the water. However, of course, since he's still bonded with a symbiote, that makes him viable material, as the poisons immediately come in to try and coerce him into joining them. And I do mean coerce. That as a little poison comes in and manages to use the psychic defense to make him believe he's seeing Sharon Carter from his books, from his original books. And sure enough, yeah, like with Spider-Man, he buys it hook, line, and sinker, and does tries to persuade Sharon to leave, but she says she's not abandoning Cap because she knows he never abandoned her, and they end up leaning in for a kiss. But Cap manages to realize, wait, no, you aren't supposed to be here, and pulls back and immediately realizes that the Sharon he's seeing is just another poison, and that he's not going to fall for it. And while the Sharon at this point does get a little upset about this, saying, hey, come on, don't be so difficult. This is just our way of trying to make this as painless as possible. To which Cap pretty much essentially gives them the rough equivalent of a middle finger, as we see his symbiote starting to cover his face again, and he just tells them, do your worst, and, well, they deliver. As you can see, bony tendrils just grab onto his face, and you can just see a look of pain on Cap's face before he lets out a scream. And sure enough, the next time we see the good Captain, he has been assimilated into the fold. As we now see the poisoned Captain America just coming up and saluting for duty, which I do actually find funny, because apparently whenever the poisons consume the host and take on their powers, well, essentially, you can see that there's still remnants of the original personality in there, as we saw with Spider-Man when he briefly hesitated when he tried killing MJ. So I love that some of Captain America's patriotism has kind of seeped into the poisons, which even Poison Cap's like, wait, no, not for my wait, no, this isn't right, because he actually says, ready to serve my country. Like, wait, no, not my country. But sure enough, yeah, with Captain America now consumed, the poisons now have access to everything that he knew, which of course lets him know about all the secrets of the Venoms. Though thankfully he doesn't know where they are because of, again, the failsafe with him and Wolverine knowing of different safe houses. And sure enough, but as Captain America is reporting to their leader asks them, what of the Source? And Cap responds that he is safe. He knows where he is, and he can get him for them. At which point the leader congratulates them, tells them that soon everything will go as planned, and the next panel shows who it is that all the poisons are reporting to. A poison version of Doctor Doom, who I am very much expecting is the venomized Doctor Doom we saw in the final story of Venomverse War Stories, which, you know what? I would totally buy that if Doctor Doom was managed to be assimilated into these guys, he would still rise to a position of power. Again, it's fucking Doom. Even if we can buy that his mind would be so absorbed that he'd become a part of this fold, a few remnants of Doom that were still in there would pretty much look at this and say, I'm not going to work for these guys. I run these guys. And yeah, he's in charge of everything. In the meantime, with the Venoms, we see that they're on the move, and, well, the main universe Venom is still not exactly okay with this strategy, because after all, this is just the rough equivalent of hide and seek. They can't, at this point, they're not really fighting the poisons, they're just trying to avoid them. And Venom thinks if they really want to stop the poisons where they are, then they need to take them out at their base. And sure enough, turns out Rocket has been working on something for that. He has a bomb that he has on standby, and he's more than ready to take the poisons down, as apparently there were venomized versions of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and sadly they've also been turned. So he's kind of making this personal. But ultimately they have to know where the poison's base is first. So that's still a hurdle they have to cross. But thankfully, as they're talking this over, they do manage to reach the safe house that Wolverine had chosen, and it turns out it's Our Lady of Saints, the church where Eddie Brock found the Venom symbiote. As such, the Venoms travel inside and are still continuing to discuss strategies. And Mania mentions how, well, she doesn't exactly like saying this, and if they want to take down the poisons, she thinks they might need a doomsday weapon because of just how powerful they are. And while Rocket tries countering that, well, I would have had something if you guys didn't keep having me use my halls to save your asses. That immediately sparks an idea in Venom. He thinks that he might be able to give them something like that, though even he admits that might be a bit crazy. However, speaking of crazy, Mania notices something. They're short of Venom. And, well, I should probably talk about Deadpool again. So, after Deadpool saw Spidey briefly hesitate against MJ, he started kind of changing his tune a little, believing that essentially everything that they were doing was pointless. That it doesn't matter how many times they're going to fight the poisons will eventually win, because every time they face them, they lose more members while the poisons numbers grow. So he just thinks that they're pretty much on a bug hunt. Yeah, pretty much. Unfortunately, which is where this next part comes in. As it turns out, while the Venoms are distracted, Deadpool slipped away and is now walking through the streets of New York calling out to the Poisons, telling them to come and get him. It's a free buffet. And sure enough, he does manage to get the attention of not only a group of little Poisons, but a bunch of other poisoned heroes and villains, including Bullseye, Iron Fist, I think White Panther and Green Goblin, and the issue ends with Deadpool saying, "Well, you know what they say: if you can't beat him, surrender peacefully and hope the initiation isn't as painful as you think it is." So, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. But yeah, my thoughts on issue 2 now. It's fine, but it's fine. Ultimately, it's really here again. We're just seeing the story progress a little bit more in this issue, and I like that we get more. And again, we finally get some more answers on how the Poisons operate. Basically, a lot of what we saw in issue 1 is still true here. We kind of get confirmed here that the Poisons essentially assimilate whoever they touch, whoever they encounter, and absorb them into the fold. And we immediately see that with Venomized Captain America and with Captain America and Spider-Man, because the instant they become a part of the Poisons, well, while you can still see remnants of the people they once were, well, it's clear they aren't the same people they once were. As well, Spider-Man is now happily gloating about how he's ready to kill Venom and even mocks him with these factoids. And likewise, Captain America is more than willing to sell out his teammates and ultimately get what they call the Source. So it's clear that they are just a part of the fold now. But I think what makes this issue even better and more scary for me is how they describe the process of becoming a part of the poison hive mind, because essentially you die. Which I think makes it even creepier, because before this you knew that whoever was encountered by a poison, that it looked like they were still alive in some form, that they were in there somewhere, especially since the new poison bodies we saw still had their shape, still had their powers, and still clearly had remnants of who they were in there. But before you learned how the process operated, it kind of gave you a little bit of hope. Like that just maybe, the original person was still alive in there, and that maybe you could help them, you could free them from whatever this was. But with the knowledge that essentially being absorbed into the poison hive mind is literally kills the host, it's fucked up. It's genuinely terrifying and adds an even creepier level to how the poisons operate, because it lets you know that facing these things, it's not just you become a part of their hive mind. No, you're gone. You are gone. Everything that makes you who you were is absorbed into who they are, and everything that you could do, they can do now. You are nothing. You are not even a weapon anymore. You are fuel. You're just essentially charcoal for the fire to them. And ultimately, the only use you have is that you had a symbiote, and now they can use your powers, but even more souped up. That's genuinely fucked up, in my opinion, and it gives a whole other layer that just how creepy these fuckers are, because ultimately it makes it clear that it's not just the symbiotes they want, it's the bodies they're attached to. We see that because we see that the Poisons do have quite a few converted superheroes and villains in their control. We saw a poisoned Scarlet Witch and a Sabretooth in their midst. And again, the leader of the Poisons right now is a poisoned Doctor Doom. And of course, yeah, while Poison Doctor Doom is no longer the original, there's still clearly enough remnants of Doom in there to show that he is very much in control and very much in power. So imagine these parasitic monsters that wish for nothing more than to consume hosts, having the will and might of Doom at their disposal. Someone who does not back down, who is very smart, and will never admit defeat even when it's staring him right in the face. Honestly, that's kind of creepy and genuinely scary to see. And the way the story describes it, when you learn that fact and see Captain America be consumed, it really just it makes you fully realize Cap is gone. And it gives a better reason for why you want to see the Poisons destroyed, because ultimately they just want the Venoms because they want their powers, they want their abilities, they want them. So they really do want them. It's like what Doc Ock said last issue. They want to know them. They want to know everything about them. And in order to do that, they have to be consumed. It's honestly really creepy, and I love that. I love it. It gives a sense of just how dangerous these things are and how much they really need to be taken down. On top of that, I do on top of that, I do like that we're still laying down plot threads for what's going to happen later in the story. Case in point, the stuff with Spider-Man and Deadpool. While Spider-Man at this point I'm just going to call a lost cause because I don't think he really reappears in the story after this point except for maybe the final issue. The stuff with Deadpool becomes very much important later because like I said, during the battle between the Venoms and the Poison Spider-Man, Deadpool noticed that even though Spider-Man was still infected, he saw the shreds of Peter Parker in there. As when he was fighting Spinneret, just for a brief second, he recognized the woman he loved. He recognized Mary Jane, and it caused him to to pause for just a second. I like that. I like seeing that, and the way they kind of build it up in the background, I think is really neat. I'm not going to say everything that Deadpool is planning because ultimately it does because there is something going on there. But you see that from the moment on, you see that Deadpool is figuring things out, and the way he immediately turns on the Venoms after that, it makes it clear that there is something going on in that crazy little head of his. So I dig that. I do like that, and clearly whatever it is, it must involve the poisons because he essentially just served himself up on a silver platter, knowing full well that whatever's going to happen to him, he's going to be dead. DOA or D. DOA. Yeah, DOA. I don't know. Did I say DEA? No, DOA. Whatever. Point is, whatever he's planning, it must be something big. And of course, there's still more. And of course, we do get a lot more. And of course, there also are still plot threads with the Venom Army as we see more of how they are interpreting everything that's going on, especially with Rocket showcasing his own personal motivation for getting them, but then of course there's even that little plot thread for how the Venoms are going to take down the Poisons, because after all, like the main universe Venom said, they're just playing hide and seek at this point. They can't just keep chasing them. So he immediately thinks, well, I think I have an idea, but even I think it's a little crazy, which means that they've got something up their sleeve, but it may not be very nice. So it's a nice way of drawing you in. And on top of that, with the Poisons mentioning that there's someone among the Venoms called the Source that they're very much interested in getting, it does make you realize it does make you wonder what the Poisons' ultimate end goal is, and it does make me curious as to where things go from there. So, yeah, on the whole, issue 2 is perfectly nice. Got plenty of good action, keeps the plot going, lays down enough plot threads to keep everything interesting and make you want to see where things go. And on the whole, overall it's still entertaining and nice. So, yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you on Thursday as we look at issue 3. So till then, I hope you have a good Tuesday and take care.